Okay, U-turn friends, it's Ashley here, and you know how much I take it to heart to find magical people as I go through the world and bring them onto the U-turn podcast. And that's why I wanted to bring Nirjary Desai onto the show. She's a visionary entrepreneur. She has pretty much 2 decades of experience in hospitality and in the service industry. And she's created award-winning, globally recognized events through her experiential agency. And she's a champion for women of color and an expert in DEI and cultural competency. And her next mission is to revolutionize the hospitality and service industry by really fostering inclusivity and impact. And one topic we've been talking about before I hit the record button for all of you was just really taking a look at our story. How do we tell our story? How do we share our story? How do we work with other people of other cultures? And how do you, if you're from a culture that feels like the other in a society you're in, how do you share your story and create connection and understanding so that we can all benefit from the tapestry that is different cultures and people from different backgrounds, which is so important. So, Nirjary, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Ashley, for having me. I'm so excited just to have a great candid conversation with you and hang out over
Yeah,
coffee.
I know. Something I feel like I find people for the podcast in everyday life, and it's like, oh, great, I get to drop in with this person for real later.
Yeah.
Um, a little bit just about your business. Can you tell me? I would love to just grasp what got you into events and where did I mean, obviously for you culturally, being a woman of color, you already think about, these things in ways that maybe other cultures aren't thinking about because they're privileged in this way or that way. Where does your work in events start to intersect with this concept for you so much so that it's become so present to talk about DEI in this way and really look at your work this way?
So I think the biggest thing is, it number one comes from me personally, right? I was born in Africa in a country called Zambia. My parents are originally from the subcontinent of India, so I am African, Indian, naturalized American at this point. I've lived in England, traveled globally all over. And I think like that's the biggest thing is, right? I think for me, the where it all comes from is this curiosity of what we call, I think one of my favorite subjects in school was just social studies, right? It was like
The
history
best.
and people and culture and cuisine and all of that. And I really kind of made it my obsession to learn about different cultures. I also speak Spanish fluently outside of two Indian languages and English, right? And I think for me, it's that thirst of the knowledge, but consistently wanting to educate myself is
Yeah.
where this comes from, right? And when I get the opportunity to talk to someone, anybody, any individual or anything like that, I feel like one of the first things I ask them, and it's never a question like, oh, what's your religion? It's, hey, what's your ethnicity? I'm
Mhm.
so interested in learning where you're from or what the story of your lineage, your legacy, or in your family is. And I think
Yeah.
like asking questions like that, they're not offensive. I think it makes people more interested in telling their story, but also embrace the question because people love to talk about where they're from. They love to talk about their family history. They love to talk about their legacy. And I think that's where the conversations for me really happened, where it collided from conversation with client to educating myself to being able to educate other people, right?
Mm.
I went to MBA school in London, and I always look at London. It's the bridge that connects the entire world,
Mm.
the East and the West, right? And
Mm.
the entire world is truly present there of all different backgrounds. And one thing about going to school there was that, I was in class with kids, people's kids that were ambassadors or, they were some sort of a foreign dignitary or whatever, right? So I think from that perspective, it was a big thing for me where I was like, wow, I have access to these people. What am I going to do with this? Right.
Mm.
And I think the other part of it also is, when my parents immigrated to the US, we lived in Pennsylvania and then we lived in South Carolina. We lived in Beaufort, South Carolina, which is close to the coast. And it's like a very southern southern city, right? And then we moved to Spartanburg, South Carolina, and through college, I worked for American Airlines at
Mm,
the airport there,
mm,
and I worked there through 9/11, all of that. And it was really interesting because I got to see how much lack of knowledge and ignorance there was
yeah.
in a place I called home, right?
Mm,
Because I grew up, going to a temple or like embracing my friends' culture by going to a Baptist church, because they were inviting people of different cultures, bring your friend to church kind of day, and just going there to learn.
mm,
Essentially, it didn't matter, what my religious background was or what my ethnicity was. We all were worshiping or believing in a higher being from a very having similar intentions, right? I think it was from similar intentions. And I think the conversation from this perspective for me was always like, what do we all have in common, right?
mm,
If we can have a conversation from a perspective of how are our cultures so similar versus what makes us different,
mm,
we would be doing very different things on a
mm,
global level. And I think that's where it really comes from for me. And when I meet my clients, whether they're a CEO for a corporation, male or female, or they are planning their dear child's, luxury destination wedding or something like that, wherever, or it's a nonprofit client. I think their story is so important because I think all of those stories and speaking about their cultural background and their ethnicities really drives me as an entrepreneur and as a business owner to truly serve my client from a place of service and understanding and empathy.
mm. Okay, so I feel like it's interesting what you're touching on because one of my favorite questions to ask somebody that I've met kind of newly is like, not just where are you from, but where feels like home.
Yeah.
I think you can learn a lot about somebody based on where they feel the most comfortable, where they feel the most themselves. And I think cities, just like humans, have personalities and energies that are kind of indicative of somebody, right? So for me, I feel the most at home in LA, but I also feel the most at home in Paris, which I'm catching a flight to tomorrow. Um, and the question is why, right? Like, what is it about you that makes you feel so good there? And sometimes it's just an energy you can't explain.
Yep.
Um, but I find that where people come from is so potent in really understanding how to best navigate them. And we hear a lot about this in DEI conversations of like really understanding other cultures. And we already know that a lot of corporate America is very performative about this because they want to check a box. And there's obviously other companies that are not looking to just check a box. They actually are having a breakthrough and implementing this in a way that
Yeah.
is important to them and resonates. And
Yeah.
can we talk a little bit about for people who um, are in business and they want to share their story in a way that doesn't just make corporate America see them as interesting, but sees them as somebody that their cultural backdrop makes them an asset. I want to educate people here on how to tell your story.
I
I've
think
done a lot
that
about, oh, go ahead.
I just love that you asked me this because, one of the things I tell people, because I do a lot of cultural competency training, I go in and work with brands, hotel brands, service related brands, hospitality, right? Hospitality is such a diverse industry that I'm a part of, right? But one of the biggest conversations in my industry that nobody is having or is scared to have is they automatically don't want to have the conversation of culture. They automatically take it to religion, but nobody's trying to have a religious conversation. And I think in this, when it comes to corporate America or any corporation or any business, the only way you can create a company culture is if you truly understand the culture of the people serving your organization from bottom to top and top to bottom,
Mm,
right? If you say that, oh, we have this company culture, we're corporation X, corporation Y, corporation Z, we have this company culture or whatever. These are just a bunch of people sitting down, putting messages and mission statements together that this is what our company culture is. But the true way to create your company culture is embracing the people of multicultural backgrounds and telling their stories and understanding that to create a very unified culture in your organization. Say
Yeah.
if somebody, celebrates Diwali, or somebody celebrates Hanukkah, somebody celebrates Kwanzaa, somebody celebrates Ramadan or Eid, during different times of the year, as it's, these holidays come up, talk about the similarities between these holidays, right?
Mm.
Essentially, all of these holidays have to do with light, and it's so
Mm.
important that we look at it from that perspective, but
Mm.
also what you're doing by as an organization by doing that is you are showing the individuals who are serving your organizations on a daily basis, leaving their families at home, sending their kids off to school or whatever to come put their blood, sweat, and tears into their organization. You're showing them appreciation that I see you. You have a seat at the table in this organization, and we are here to make sure not just that you're serving us, but we are serving you because we want to celebrate you. And
Mm.
that is so important, because I think the commonality is that we've been ingrained in this society for a long time, that it's like, everything's about money, everything's about reputation, and everything's about this social media culture of smoke and mirrors and whatnot, right? But what truly brings us together in any organization is that reminder that
Yeah.
we are human beings serving human beings. And how can we really take that level of conversation and understand that you might be Indian, you might be South Asian, you might be Asian, you might be American, you might be British, you might be Muslim, you might be Persian, you might be whatever. But at the end of the day, everything stripped down is we are human beings serving human beings. And that's what it truly comes down to, right?
Mm.
And understanding it from a level of very simplicity, you
Mm.
know? I think in corporate America and just in organizations, we all get so ingrained of trying to put some sort of like a glorified system in place of what DEI should mean.
Mm.
But the simplicity is DEI is the golden rule of life,
Mm.
doing to others as you would have them do back to you.
Mm.
So that means accepting and embracing the people who are fueling their energy on a daily basis into your organization, regardless of what gender they are, regardless of what culture they are, but celebrating that and appreciating that, because
Yeah.
that's when we're going to revolutionize understanding each other.
Mhm. Mhm. It's interesting. I noticed myself as you're talking about all these people giving so much to the company, and the entrepreneur in me wants to like also acknowledge the entrepreneur that's like, and you're doing so much to bring this vision to life, and like
Yeah,
so hard to pay these people and keep them on your payroll.
exactly.
Sometimes there's this energy in corporate America that's like, we're giving so much here. And I'm like, yeah, but there's somebody behind this that risked everything. And you have a full-time thing because they did it. Um,
I think the thing is, it's like you said, right? I come from I'm an immigrant in America. My parents
right.
are immigrants. My sister was born here. And when you look at this culture, right? And like you said, these people are giving everything. Corporate America thinks that they're giving a lot. Hey, listen, giving somebody a salary for what they're doing for you and making sure that their livelihood is sustainable based on the cost of living in the market that your company is operating in is important, right?
Yeah.
But transparency is also important. But I think like that risking everything, my parents risked everything to leave
Yeah.
Africa, to have this American dream, to come here with 500 bucks in their pocket, to make millions or whatever and a livelihood. And I think that is extremely important to understand, right? There are people of different multicultural backgrounds who have risked so much. We've got Holocaust survivors, we've
Yeah.
got people that have like, crossed the border, or people that were refugees and whatnot, that risked anything they ever knew back in their homeland and country and whatever, came to this country to serve. And
Mhm.
these people are well educated. What they went through, they were either doctors, lawyers, engineers, all of it. They left all of that to come here and be part of a service industry or do whatever it took to
Yeah.
be part of the fabric of what America is supposed to be now, which is the
Mhm.
land of opportunity, the land of dreams, right? The American dream. Well, the American dream was built by immigrants, right?
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
think when we look at it from that perspective, organizations need to start looking at truly the culture of their staff, the culture of their employees, because that is so important to understand. When you understand this person's story and the struggles they went through, and they still show up on a daily basis into your organization
Mhm.
and pour their heart and soul into it to make sure you're profitable.
Mhm.
Not just that you're providing a salary for them, okay? That's
Mhm.
inevitable. Everybody should be compensated for their work. But as corporate America, when you stop looking at that you're providing this for them, then they're going to provide a lot more for you.
Mhm.
Because all you need to figure out what you're providing is acceptance, understanding, and celebrating their culture.
Yeah. Yeah.
That goes beyond the dollar amount of somebody's salary.
Yeah. For sure. It's like respect, and it's such an art. Like hiring somebody is a science in some ways, right? It's like you put your posting out, you get this number of applications, this many people can do it. But there's a big difference between culture and competency fit, right?
Exactly.
And there's the culture of the person, there's the culture of your company, and then there's the competency you're hiring for. Can they do the job? I used to hire people and just be like, can they do the job? I don't, you know, you can be from anywhere, any way. Can you do it? And that enough was the perfect thing for me. Now I've realized, no, there's so much more than just can they do the job. I've learned
Do they
that
want to do their job?
exactly.
Are they passionate about the job? Are they obsessed with making a difference? Are they an individual that wants to create impact? Right?
Mhm.
Because it's so easy, right? I think there's small business owners and entrepreneurs, it's so different. For corporations, it's so different, right? But at the end of the day, the common goal, whether you're an entrepreneur or you're a big corporate giant, is the same. Am I creating an impact? Am I able to make sure that I'm making a difference? If we dumb it down to what really matters and what each organization's goal or individual's goal is, everyone's goal is the same,
Right.
you know? And I think that's the biggest thing that I think over the years I've stopped seeing that, or maybe it's just been a shift in mindset, or it's been a shift in energy, or what. But I'm seeing that it's more of like, well, I don't care. I don't have to put the effort in. I'm happy where I'm here, or I'm comfortable right here. And, the mentality of, well, if it's not broke, what's the point of fixing it?
Right.
Right. I think
There's so
there's a
many
lot of
thoughts.
that. There's a
Yeah,
lot
it's
of
like you're talking about some really important things for people to get. Like we're talking about culture and competency. And when it comes to culture, we hear a lot about core values. And what I've learned, especially recently, is that there's your own core values as a woman, as a person, for me, I'm like, okay, my core values are fun and connection and self-expression. Um, and then there's the core values of the company, right? Like my agency, we've booked more than 100 people on stage for TEDx. We've written a lot of TEDx talks. Our core values are about sovereignty, and the reason for that is because a lot of companies try to absorb us and white label us. And for those of you who don't know white labeling, it's like a lot of big giants that like PR firms, they want to just be like selling our service, but nobody knows it's us. So sovereignty is a value. Like we stand alone. We don't get absorbed by anybody. Love is a value. Like whenever I look at drafts from the speechwriter, I'm like, are you just getting this done? Are you loving this thing? Are you giving it? Are you pouring into it?
Yeah.
Excellence, right? But then there's the values of what you have as core values of the people you hire. And there's going to be many different people from many different cultures that fit those core values. So one core value I have in the people that I hire is speed. That is not like a personal core value. That's not necessarily a company core value, but it's something I value crazy in somebody I hire. Do I feel their focus and attention? And I see it from the beginning. Like when I'm in the hiring process, do they send me the thank you message right away? Do they reply? Like I don't I feel like there's people in business that bring you momentum or people that take it away. And I feel like when you're hiring, if somebody's on a slow timeline, that's okay, but I want to feel their attention. So there's other core values I have, but what you're pointing to is interesting because you're basically talking about purpose, capacity,
Yeah.
and capability, right? So there's other things here, and this is so fun how this kind of goes hands in hands with the stories that people tell when they get hired, which I want to ask you about. But when you think about purpose, like I read the book and it's by my friend Ben Hardy, who's been on the podcast twice. 10x is greater than 2x or easier than 2x. So anybody who hasn't read that book, Ben is such a beast, such a great book with Dan Sullivan. He basically talks about how having 10x thinking, doing 10x shit is much easier than 2x, right? A lot of people are trying to 2x their business or their career or whatever. And he talks about how a 10x move is having people who see their role in whatever you're doing. So if you're a manager hiring people in a corporation or you're an entrepreneur hiring people for your company, it's hiring people that see the role as an opportunity for them to use their gifts, and they want to use that gift and they see the purpose in using that gift. And I have people at Wise Whisper Agency that are so powerful in the right seat. I feel
Mhm.
like my company is a freaking weapon. Like, it's like we've got my head of creative who used to help create decks for Steve Jobs. Like, we've
Huh.
got visionaries, right? And she shows up every day and she knows that my company is a place for her to 10x her gift. And we want it, we need it, she wants it, and it gets her up, right? So that's the purpose side of it. Then there's the she sees the purpose and what we're doing. She sees the competency for herself. And then the final piece that a lot of people aren't paying attention to, especially after the pandemic, is competency. A lot of people are like, or not, sorry, not competency, capacity. A lot
Yeah.
of people I've interviewed, they're like, well, I want to do 20 hours in real estate and 20 hours in this job and 20 hours for
Yep.
you. I'm like, you don't have capacity for this thing. So the purpose piece is huge, people connecting to the purpose. The the gift is a 10x thing, the competency, and then the
Yep.
capacity. Okay, so let's say we have somebody who has those three things. They feel a lot of purpose in what you're doing, and they feel a lot of competency of 10xing their gift. They have the capacity to show up and be present. And
Yep.
now there's this other piece, which is culture, which is really important. How do they use that culture and share their story and look at their story in a way that helps the employer see who they are and also how it's a gift?
I think number one, I think, as long as I mean, and I think we hear this at conferences and just everywhere in self-help stuff is like, your story is so important, right? Never shy away from it. And I think like, we're all told different things growing up, being of different cultures or whatever. And then some of those stories stick with us and we're having those conversations with ourselves consistently in our head. But I think the biggest thing is also making sure that you never forget where you came from. I tell people this all the time. I speak to a lot of like college kids as well. And I was like, never forget where you started or where you came from. It is so important because guess what? You can become so successful here. You can rise up the corporate ladder. You can become an entrepreneur that's taken your company at IPO or sold it or whatever. But at the end of the day, what makes you a true inspiration and of value is that you never forgot where you came from and that story of you. And that
Mm,
story of you, no one can take away from you, right? No one can take it from you because that's part of your experience. That's part of who you are. That's what makes you this invaluable person in the organization that you serve, right? And I think it also comes down to going to your boss and telling your boss, hey, listen, I know we're having this challenge on this project and, XYZ. I did a little bit of research on the client, and the client could be a big conglomerate from Mexico, right? We'll just use this as a hypothetical. Well, I happen to be, Mexican American. I speak Spanish fluently. And in my culture, these are the things that are important because, when my dad and my mom lived with my grandparents and blah, 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 I think weaving in
mm. Stories.
and weaving in that story of
Mm,
why, as an organization, this is why I see the challenges that you guys are having an issue winning this piece of business. But
Mhm.
let me explain to you how that's going to work, right?
Mm.
And that's what happened. Like, it's like,
Mm.
for me, that's kind of like my story, right? When I started working in the hotel hospitality world, being South Asian, and this was almost 20 years ago, being South Asian started kind of getting more recognized in the full service hotel space, right?
Mhm.
So, full service hotels, at that time I used to work for like the West End portfolio of hotels, right?
Mhm.
At that time, being South Asians started utilizing full service hotels more, right? Then I had these sales managers who are very, Anglo male, female, or not coming from this background or ever understanding it. They associated being Indian and South Asian with, oh, okay, I like Indian food or I like chicken tikka masala. Well, that's not all of it, right?
Right.
It's about how can you serve this client? It started with a lead that came in from a national organization of lawyers or whatever. I started getting pulled in because I happened to be Indian, and they
Mm.
started these coworkers started asking me all these questions or whatever because they just wanted to win this big piece of business, right? It
Mhm.
helped it helped ex sales manager win their monthly or quarterly goals and all of this stuff. But what that kind of turned into was I saw a gap between my community and this full service hotel space and what was lacking, right? And so I kind of use that to my advantage to be able to kind of say, hey, listen, I can be of help to you because I'm South Asian, I'm Indian, I come from this region that this organization is part of. Let me sit in the meeting with you and let me help you sell and close this piece of business because it's important for our team to win, right? And what happened? It worked, you
Mm.
know? They were like, wow, we didn't expect this. It started with me giving the client was coming in for food tasting or whatever. I started giving recipes and saying, this is what I think chefs should make because they're trying to make sure. Because listen, they're not here to try your burgers and fries. They know what that tastes like. That's easy. And you really can't mess that up. But if you're going to fuel and want their business and you really want to win that business, you need to understand them from their culture, their palate. And when you start and look at it from that perspective and you approach the piece of business from that perspective of understanding and competency, it becomes more of a reason for them to want to work with you. And I think that shows enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Like you said, speed, it shows competency, it shows speed. I think that's the other thing, right? I think depending on what generation you come from or whatever, like we come from a place where, like, hey, as soon as you have an interview with somebody or you do a call with somebody or whatever, it's important to send a nice follow-up message immediately, right? I hear from people now, oh, well, you don't want to sound thirsty. It's not thirsty. It's common respect for somebody, right? For their time, for their advice, for whatever it may be, the opportunity to collaborate with them because you've been looking for an opportunity like this, right? So I think that's the big thing that people need to kind of retrain themselves to understand. There's nothing wrong with follow up. There's nothing wrong with being speedy, but be thorough at the same time. Speed, being speedy and fast at your
Right.
job is one thing, but being speedy and fast and
Mhm.
having meticulous attention to detail,
Yeah, next
that's a
level.
whole nother thing.
Yeah, I love that. I just felt my little entrepreneurial boner, for lack of a
Yeah.
better term. I
I mean,
don't even know if
listen,
that's
it's like
even
I've
appropriate.
had people interview
Yeah.
with me that have interviewed
Yeah.
so well, and you're like, oh wow, okay, like this is different from what the previous interviews or whatever. Soon
Yeah.
as you give them the opportunity, they're great for a first week. Then you start noticing everything that they can't do
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
so many people are putting on a show. And, I think we see it from social media or whatever. It's this big smoke and mirror show. If you're not something, don't try to be something you're not,
Yeah.
right? I think in an organization, play out on what your strengths are. Don't
Yeah.
try to say that you're strong at X, Y, and Z if you're not strong at it.
Right. Right. Right.
And I think because eventually it comes up, eventually it shows.
Exactly. Who you are. I say this all the time. Who you are always wins. You might as well be honest in the first pass or it's
Exactly.
gonna rear itself out. Okay, so here's what I love that you did, and I kind of talk about this when I used to create courses about career stuff and elevator pitches. is the power of showing and not just telling. It's one thing to say, to tell somebody, I'm detail oriented. It's another thing to show a story from your upbringing and to notice like, oh, this is a company that's going to value detail orientation. Let me show somebody a story from my culture, from my upbringing that like shows this. And I love how you really do turn it into like this power tool for companies and stories. I could do a whole TED talk, and I probably have written
Yeah,
one for a client about how old standing storytelling is and why it's such a tool for connection. So
yeah,
there's so much more happening in somebody's brain chemistry when you're able to do
absolutely.
it that way. So, I think being able to say, maybe take a look at the company you're looking at and what are the top 3 or 4 qualities that somebody needs to have for that job and for that company, and what are some stories from your upbringing and from your life that really back those qualities. And even better, do you have any stories from your work history that also play into these qualities that you can show people you have this quality and not just tell them? Especially when it comes to the question, what's your biggest weakness? Being able to say,
Yep.
well,
How
in the
did you
past.
convert
Yeah,
adversity into an achievement?
exactly. This has been such a cool conversation, unexpected but perfect and like necessary. I think you helped me realize there's a lot of thoughts I've had about hiring. Um, I'm in the trenches of a startup right now and we're growing so fast. Like I don't even know how many people are on our team. I have to look at the org chart, but we were just me and a speechwriter and a booking person, maybe 9 months ago. Now I think we're a team of 15. So it's like,
Amazing.
it's just booming. And I needed this information myself to like just think about people and how to connect. And so where can everybody find you if they want to work with you on an event? I know we didn't talk much about your events, but obviously you do them.
Yes.
And who is the right person to reach out to and just where they could go?
Yeah, so they can find us on Instagram, they can find us on LinkedIn, they can find us on Facebook. You can reach out to me directly. My personal website is nirjarydesai.rocks. My company website is kisscubedevents.com, and it's KIS with one S. We are on all social platforms. You can also shoot an email to info@kisscubedevents.com. And if you have anything from speaking engagements to corporate galas to brand activations, or even luxury destination retreats and weddings, we're here to help you because for me, it's so important that we want to tell your story, whether you're an individual or a brand or a couple. We want to tell your story from a very authentic and transparent place.
Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.